Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura Penrose. I'm a knitwear designer and content creator, and I am here today with a special video for you. I asked on my past few videos if you guys would like to see a video all about how I became a knitwear designer and answering your questions based on the subject, and it was met with a resounding yes please. So here we are. I have already filmed this once and it was basically an hour of me blabbering on and it didn't really make much sense. So I went over to Instagram and asked you guys what you want to know. What are your burning questions about being a knitwear designer and how to get there? I know a lot of you who follow my work would love to become a knitwear designer, whether that's full-time or as a side gig, and hopefully in this video I'm going to be able to empower you to give it a go and answer any queries or questions you might have. So I have gone through all the questions that I received on Instagram. A lot of them were the same question and I've kind of tried to put them into categories. I'm looking over here because I've got my computer with all my questions and everything there. So if I'm looking to and from, that's why. But I wanted this video to be really informative and I want to say succinct, but that doesn't feel right. Like, I want you to learn from this video basically. So I need some kind of prompt. I've got my notes, I've got my questions, but yes, I've put them into different categories. We're going to go through a brief history as to how I got here in the first place. We're going to cover the design process. We're going to talk about grading because my goodness, that was the most asked questions. How on earth do you learn to grade? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you. And then we've got technical questions about different parts of the industry and the job itself. And then we've got some more kind of personal, kind of mental health based questions about mindset, imposter syndrome, work-life balance, that kind of thing. So hopefully we're going to cover everything you are wondering about today. But if there is still a question that you have, please feel free to put it below in the comments and I'll do my best to answer in the comments. And if there are enough questions, we can always do a part 2. So I'm going to stop procrastinating. I think I'm a little bit nervous. It's definitely always harder to talk about myself than it is to talk about like what I'm knitting on or what I'm working on at the time. So let's just do it. So a history about me. So if you're reasonably new to my content and haven't been following me from the beginning, I started out as just a knitter. I was pregnant with my second child and I was anxious about my pregnancy because I struggled the first time round and I wanted something to keep my mind and my hands busy throughout that period. And I still don't really know why to this day I decided to try knitting, but I just did. And the rest, as they say, is history. I absolutely, what I now realise, is hyper-focused on it, and I was able to pick it up really, really quickly thanks to my amazing ADHD brain and quickly became very, very good at it. I, however, didn't have anyone in my life I knew who knit, so I had no one to share these things with. So naturally I took to Instagram and started an Instagram just for my knitting because I was putting it on my personal Instagram and nobody cared and I didn't have anyone to talk about, so I just started my own page. Not with the intention of it being anything. I've always enjoyed Instagram and I've had a number of different accounts based on different things over the years and they've always done reasonably well. I just enjoy the process. But it wasn't like a goal to become a content creator and knitwear designer. And I think that was one of the questions. Yeah, was it a goal you always had in mind or did you just like fall into it? And I absolutely fell into it. It wasn't ever something I thought I could do or wanted to do. I'd never been particularly interested in design. I've always been very creative and my most successful things have always been creative based. And if I'm not doing something where I'm using my imagination and my creativity, then I'm very unhappy. I've been a baker, I've been a wedding calligrapher, and those were my happiest times because I was creating something. But none of them really stuck like knitting did. And so I started my Instagram, that started to gain a bit of traction, and then I started to find knitting podcasts and videos on YouTube about knitting. And again, YouTube is something I had dabbled in the past, but I had never really found my niche, found the thing that I loved to talk about the most. So I decided one afternoon in the middle of our renovation, which was during the second lockdown, when my daughter was having a nap, to just sit down and do it and make one of these podcasts that I really enjoyed watching. I had recently started talking to a lovely young lady called Caroline of Caroline's Knits, who is now one of my closest friends, and she was doing it. She was already making videos, and she definitely encouraged me and kind of let me know how to do things initially, and I loved it. I absolutely loved the process of it, and I still don't know why to this day, but something about that video hit the algorithm well, and it grew very, very quickly, and I gained a lot of subscribers very quickly and got a lot of views very quickly. In the grand scheme of things, you know, we're talking like, I think I grew to 1,000 subscribers pretty quickly. Now, I think I was very much right place at the right time because the market wasn't overly saturated at the time. It is now. It's really difficult to start a podcast now because there are just so many of them. And the quality is so high now, really, really is. So it makes it even harder to be seen in that space. So yeah, I think I was quite lucky in that way. But also people liked what I was saying and the way I was saying it and the way I was presenting my knits. So I decided to run with it. And over the next couple of months, 6-7 months, my YouTube grew, my Instagram grew, and I finally decided to take the plunge and have a go at writing a knitting pattern in August 2021. So about 6 months after I started my YouTube channel. Now, I had always kind of been designing. I look back and I feel like I've been designing since day one. I get very frustrated with reading patterns because of the way my brain works. I see a page of text and it goes, no, I shan't and I won't. This is why I listen to audiobooks rather than read books. And I would often find following them frustrating, and I learned most of my knitting skill from watching videos on YouTube rather than reading patterns. But over time, I began to learn more techniques and thought, what if I just try it like this? And maybe if I did it like that, it would be better. Most of the time, it wasn't better. But I am very much a learn by doing person. That is just my learning style. So from the beginning of knitting, I was always trying new things and putting patterns together and having a go at different things because I learn by failing and trying again. It's just how I work. It's not the case for a lot of people. They will want to work the patterns perfectly over and over again and learn everything that way. They'll prefer to watch, like, do a course or a lesson and things like that. Like, I cannot be taught. Don't even try to teach me because it will not go in. It will not work. I have to teach myself. So learning that about myself was really important, I think, when it comes to starting my knitwear design career. So I released my first pattern, which was a sock pattern, and it did pretty well. I still remember the launch weekend, it sold around 300 copies, which I now realise is huge, is like a lot, especially for a first release. And I fully believe that that had a lot to do with my social media following at the time, but we'll get over to that in a minute. But the first release went quite well. The second release, which was another sock pattern, didn't do anywhere near as well, and I was like distraught. I was like, this is it, I can't do this. Like, it was just a fluke the first time, but somehow I managed to keep going, and later that year I released a set of accessories which did well again. Not as well as the first pattern, but still they did well. Fast forward to April 2022 and the release of the souffle sweater, which was my first souffle tee, which was my first garment design, and to this day still one of my most successful patterns. I think that one did so well because it was such a unique design. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. It was very like specific in its look. It was very feminine. It was like ethereal and floaty, and I think at the time lots of people were really enjoying knitting with mohair. So I think, again, the right thing at the right time and intentionally, but that really hit. And I remember when I had that first launch weekend and I saw the numbers, that's when I thought, okay, well, actually, yeah, maybe this could be a thing. I think I might actually be quite good at this. So let's really give this a go. So I did, and I went completely overboard. I was like, that's it, I'm going to be the next petite knit. And I was churning out pattern after pattern. There was the summer souffle, there was the chunky souffle, chantilly cardigan, chantilly vest, pattern, 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 pattern. And a year later, I was done. I was really struggling. None of the patterns did anywhere near as well as the first souffle design. I was really struggling with who I was as a designer and whether I wanted to do this, where I could do it or not. And I then lost my Instagram account, which was an absolute blessing in disguise. At the time it was painful because by that point I'd gotten to about 20,000 followers, and that was just all taken away from me. But it was a blessing in disguise because I realised just how much pressure I was putting on myself to be something that I just wasn't yet, and not even something I necessarily wanted to be. So in the summer of 2023 I took a big break and I stopped designing. Well, I was technically still designing, but I didn't realise I was designing at the time. Stopped intentionally designing, took a break, still stayed present on YouTube and kind of got back to what it was I started doing in the first place. I did a week of vlogging in the summer, and no, I did a whole month of vlogging. I did Vlogmas in July and absolutely loved it, and just kind of got back in touch with myself and who I was. You could probably say I burnt out, I think. And during that time, I made myself a blanket. And this blanket came from pure joy, just what I wanted to do. I tried a few different blankets and hated the way they were constructed and thought, do you know what? I like doing it this way, so I'm going to construct it this way, and I really like this and it's bringing me joy, and I just worked on it as and when I wanted to. And then I shared it in a podcast and people quite liked it. And I thought, should I do this? I never thought I'd be a blanket designer. Why not? Let's give it a go. But I did it secretly. I had a secret test knit and I announced it about a week before the release. And that was a Sweet Shop blanket, which is now by far my most best-selling pattern and is what made me finally feel like a knitwear designer. It did so well and still does really well. I look at the numbers every month and I can't believe people are still buying it. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. And I think that pattern did so well because it just was a pure extension of me and who I was at the time, what I needed. I wasn't trying to be anything at all. I was just being myself, and that was reflected in the pattern, and I think it did really well because of that. It's also scrappy, and my goodness, people love scrappy patterns and they're so fun to design and I love them. I never thought I'd be a scrappy designer, but that's something that has definitely influenced my work since the Sweet Shop. So I'd come back again, I had this newfound feeling of excitement and self-belief, and I started my Patreon, which is another amazing step for me. It's a huge part of my business now, a huge part of my income and a huge part of my happiness. Patreon is a lovely place to be. The community feeling is lovely. I feel like I can be 100% myself without risk of being like judged or criticised, and that's something that comes with YouTube and Instagram and Craftsnark and all that kind of stuff. So having that safety and community in Patreon really has become an integral part of my business and something I love so much, and it keeps me authentic and being myself. And then we get into 2024, and 2024 was a year of balance for me. I'd had the success of the Sweet Shop. I also had the Maxine hot water bottle cover, which did really, really well. Again, that pattern came from just, I wanted to make my sister a hot water bottle pattern. I fancied some colour work, so I just did what I wanted to do and what felt good to me. And lo and behold, that pattern did really well as well. Helped by being on the front cover of Ravelry twice. But yeah, so 2024, I just spent more time doing what I loved, following the dopamine. The Stella quilt cushion and blanket came that year, and by the end of the year, I was pretty much done on the Midland cardigan, which again is probably one of my best-selling designs, and it was like my, I want to say magnum opus. Is that the right word? I don't really know, but that released right at the beginning of this year, 2025, and the beginning of 2025 was also a big moment for me because it's when I did my very first tax return and realised, damn, this is a career now. Like, I'm a girl boss. It's time to take life seriously. And so I know we're only 3 months into 2025, but the past few months have been like some of the best months of my life because I finally feel like this is it, this is me, this is what I do, this is my career. And those feelings came from a lot of hard work, a lot of therapy, and we're going to go into all that later on, but that's kind of my storyline. It was very much like this. It came and came and went, and all of this was happening whilst I was being a full-time parent to 2 small kids under school age, and we'll get more into that later on as well, but it was just very much my kind of side hustle. Maybe I'm enjoying doing it, so I'm just going to give it a go for quite a while. And then it was the past year that it really cemented and became my career. So that's my brief history, not so brief at 17 minutes long, but I'm now going to go through all the questions that I've been given, and hopefully that'll give you much more insight into the ins and outs of it all. So first of all, the design process. This was one of my most asked questions. So you've got an idea, what next? How do you go from that idea in your head to it being a pattern? So I'm going to tell you about my process, but this is not the same for everyone and isn't the way that you have to do it or you should be doing it. It's just the way that I do it. I obviously know lots of different knitwear designers because it's my industry and everyone does things differently. So, and also it can differ from design to design, and the way I design now is very different to how it was in the beginning because it was a very, very steep learning curve, and obviously with each design you learn more, you get better at it, you learn from your mistakes, you become more efficient. So what I'm going to describe now is something that has developed over 4 years, really 3-4 years of practicing this. So don't go into it expecting it to be perfect the first time, but this is my rough process. I will have an idea which will be triggered by anything, but I'll have a thought, I'll have an idea, and then I now will sketch it out a little bit. I've got one over there, I'm not going to go and get it, but I will do a little rough sketch of kind of what I want it to be, whether that's a garment or a blanket or a scarf. I've got the idea. I will then think about yarn. Now sometimes the yarn comes first, sometimes I'll receive a yarn or I'll be given a yarn and that will trigger an idea. But either way, I then swatch. You have to. There's no way around it. There are times where I didn't, and it always made the process so much harder. Every single time you have to swatch, because from your swatch you get your gauge. You get to see if the fabric behaves the way you want it to, if you like the way that it looks. The number of times I've swatched for something and I've gone, oh, I thought that was a really good idea, but ew, no, that's not good. Or I've been like, this isn't quite right. Maybe we try this, maybe we do that. Okay, yes, I really, really like this fabric. I think it will work in this design. So you start with your swatch. From your swatch, you then get your gauge, and then I like to do a preliminary grade. So this is a very simple rough grade where I basically just kind of grade my size, and I basically will grade my size kind of all the way through, and I'll kind of do a rough grade of everything else. I use Excel to grade, and this is something I learned the hard way. When I was first learning to grade, I was doing it with a pen and paper and a calculator and doing every single sum in my head, well not in my head, but doing every single sum manually myself, and it was absolute carnage. Grading the souffle and the eclair sweater, the eclair took over a week to grade. I could grade the eclair sweater in a day now, I think quite easily, but through that process of grading the eclair sweater, it's the first time I'd really used Excel. I learned a lot. I have to learn by doing, I have to learn by failing. It's just the way my brain works. You'll probably hear me say that a lot during this video, but learning to use Excel is so, so important. And again, I'll talk about that more later. Do we need to start a drinking game for how many times I'm going to say that? But yes, I will do a preliminary grade, and I will kind of do a rough grade across the other sizes. So I'll like expand it out, just starting at the bust circumference, and I'll do a rough grade for the bicep circumference and like neck holes and lengths and all that kind of thing. Just really, really rough. But I will then cast on my first sample, and then you kind of have to go through this weird process, or at least this is the way I do it. I will knit and grade and write at the same time. So I'll do the grade, and then I will do a rough write-up of that, just that section. So if we're just talking like short rows on the back of a drop shoulder, I'll grade that, roughly write it, and then I'll knit it. And then whilst I'm knitting it, I can refine what I've written. I can check the grading. If it needs to be tweaked or changed, I will rip back and go again, and I'll do that bit. And then I'll move on to the next section. So if we're talking a drop shoulder, I'll knit the back. I'll figure out how long my armholes need to be, and then I'll do the front, and then I'll grade that, write that, knit that, and then basically go through the whole sweater. So normally it's quite intense the first time, the first bit, because all the action is here, and then you get a nice bit of time to work the body, nice bit of time to work the sleeve, that kind of thing. If it's something like if it's something small like a sock or a scarf or even a blanket, if it's the same thing repeated, I'll quite often roughly write the whole pattern based on that one little bit that I've done, and then I'll keep knitting it more and referencing what I've written and tweaking what I've written, and then I'll knit a bit more and reference and tweak and change and refine. And then when I get to a point where I feel like I've got a complete pattern and I have turned my computer off, gone to sleep, checked it again the next day, I will then send it off to my tech editor. She will then go through it, come back to me with any edits, any changes, and I'm not going to lie to you, there have been patterns where I've gone through 10, 15 edits. This one, oh my goodness, even though this is one of my most recent designs, so many edits, so many changes, because I pressed send too soon. I sent it to my editor before I'd fully knit it, before I'd really even tried it on. I was trying to be efficient, I was trying to get things done, but it was just too soon. Whereas things like the Midland cardigan, which I procrastinated it for 2 years, but I had knit it, and then I had knit it again and gone through it so many times and double checked it and triple checked it, and then I sent it off to my editor. The pattern I thought was going to be the hardest thing to edit in the world only had 2 edits because I'd been thorough in the first place. So once I get the sign off from my editor, so that's her saying, yep, the maths is all good, spelling is all good, obviously there are still going to be tweaks here and there, it then goes off to test. I do my test scores on Instagram, so I'll put out a post saying, I'd like test knitters, fill in this form, and then I will select testers, and then the test will start. Finding test knitters can be difficult in the very beginning, but it's just like tech editing, it's a really vital part of the process, because you can't edit your own work. Just because it makes sense to you does not mean it will make sense to everyone, and even then you can't always make it make sense for everyone, but you have to at least make sure it makes sense to most. Even to this day I am humbled by test knits. Like the number of times I'm like, this is going to be easy, this is going to be simple, there's going to be no issues here. It's like, that makes 0 sense. What on earth do you mean? I don't think this is right. Like with this little guy I keep pointing to, my Jacques scarf, which is my latest pattern that's in test at the moment and is coming out in a few weeks. Humbled by how much we needed to change in this test knit. So it's so important, but also a really beautiful part of the process. I used to really struggle with test knitting. I used to find it anxiety filling. I used to be terrified of people being upset with me for not choosing them, and I really had to come to terms with the fact that I cannot choose everyone. As my business grew and my following grew, I get hundreds and hundreds of people apply to test, and there are 30 spaces maximum. So I had to get comfortable with saying no and being okay with that, and I know that I do it in the most fair way as I possibly can. I consider all applicants. I have new testers in every test. Yes, there are veterans, because it's good for me to have people who I know and trust and are gonna give me good feedback and aren't going to hold back through fear of making me feel bad by highlighting something I might have got wrong. I need people who are going to tell me straight, but there are always new people, so there is always opportunity for new people. I try to be as fair as possible with my test knits, and I now find them really, really enjoyable. It's lovely to work with other people. It's lovely to get other people's opinions, to get to know other people, and it's just a lovely process and something I really, really enjoy. But it wasn't always that way. Test knitting is hard at first. And it's scary because quite often you think, well, the pattern is perfect and the editor says it's perfect. So what if someone says there's a problem? Am I going to be able to know how to fix it? One of my biggest fears was like not knowing how to fix my own problem. But there has never been a problem I've not been able to fix. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes you put it off, but ultimately the problems always get fixed. And if I can't figure out how to do it, a tester will or my editor will. So yeah, it's scary, but you just got to do it. So once the pattern is edited, I will then do my final format, which is basically I take the Google Doc that I have made for the test, then gets put into the final format. I use InDesign. You don't have to use InDesign. I only use it because my sister's a graphic designer and she taught me how to use it. But you can use things like Canva. You could even just use Word or Pages. You can format in there easily. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive software. You know, as long as you are considering things like readability, accessibility, font size, font color, that kind of thing, it's easily done. And then I send that off to my tech editor for one final check, and she'll make sure I've done all my formatting properly, and she'll check again that the maths has been translated well, that I've not got a typo or anything like that. And then we release, and that's it. There you go. That's the process I go through. So we're going to go a little bit more into getting past the mental blocks later on, but that's basically my design process for now. Next up, the thing I had the most questions about was grading. How do you learn to grade? Literally at least 50% of the questions were, how do you learn to grade? How did you learn to grade? What are your resources? Now I am going to put in the description below my favourite resources and ones that I think are helpful and useful. However, as I mentioned before, I'm very much a learn by doing person. So when people ask me how I learnt to grade, my answer is, I just did it. I just did it. I just tried. I just gave it a go. And I know that's not helpful, but I look back now and I realised how much prep I'd been doing coming up to that. I'd obviously knit a lot of sweaters, so I understood garment construction. I had done a lot of test knitting. Now I know in this day and age it can be really difficult to get into a test knit in the first place because, like I said, hundreds of applicants and not everyone can be chosen. Even if you are the best candidate for the role, it doesn't mean you're going to get chosen, and it's not personal. There's just so many people who want to do it. But having a go at being part of a test knit, applying for test knits for smaller designers is a great way because you have access to a designer and you can learn a lot about the process as you go. But grading wise, again, it's just back to baptism of fire for me. I just gave it a go and I failed a lot and it took a long time and I made a lot of mistakes. But I learned how to do it in the process. Now, there are so many resources. You can go to, what's it called? Not Craftsy, the other one. There's like that website that's all about like, it's like lessons and creative things. It'll come to me when I stop thinking about it. Skillshare, there it is, Skillshare. This would be a great opportunity to be sponsored by Skillshare. Alas, I am not. So online places where you can do courses that you pay for. There are so many out there. You literally just have to Google it. Grading course, knitwear grading course, Google. Find a course, check the testimonials, check the reviews, check the testimonials, and you can do a course. Obviously, you have to pay for this. But if you really want to give this a go, then it's an investment. It's a really good part of it, and we will get into the financial side of it later on. But if you're serious about it, it's a great way to go. But obviously you don't have to spend the money on it. I literally just learned by doing and trying. Now, to grade something successfully, you need to have sizing standards to go by. Now, this is an interesting point. Most people, most designers, will go by the Craft Yarn Council sizing standards, and that is a website where they've done a big poll and gathered information from everyone, and they've come up with basically average sizing standards, and they go from an extra small to a 5X in like standard women's, standard men's. There's also kid sizing, baby sizing, shoe sizing, well, foot, sock sizing, accessory sizing, all that kind of thing. And they are a great place to start because it gives you like an average ballpark for each size, the average, you know, bicep for that, for chest, the average length, the average circumference, all that kind of stuff. But they are just averages, and really, really good grading, and particularly good size inclusive grading goes a lot deeper than that. And this is again something that I learned over time, but I learned to grade most effectively by listening to my test knitters and by listening to people who have the body types that I'm grading for. My tech editor recommended to me a creator called Sister Mountain, and this is, I think, one of the best resources that certainly I've ever found. She does paid for courses, and she also, I think, does free workshops occasionally, and she also has a lot of resources on her website. And this is where I found the sizing standards that I personally use, because I was finding the sizing standards for Craft Yarn Council just were not size inclusive enough. They didn't give me wrist circumference, they didn't give me neck circumference, and there just wasn't enough detail there. So my editor recommended Sister Mountain, and if you sign up for her newsletter you get the sizing standards for free, and they're just great. They're just so much better, just really, really, really good. I also used Sister Mountain when I wanted to learn how to figure out how much yarn do I need for each size. I've made my sample, I know how much yarn I use, but how on earth do I figure out how much yarn someone doing a 3X would use? And she has this whole spreadsheet that you can download that explains every single step, and that you put your information in and doop-de-doop-de-doop, boom. I now understand the maths of that spreadsheet, but when I first did it, I didn't know where to start. I had no idea. I didn't understand how it worked. It was magic, but it worked, and it was great, and it was a free resource. So Sister Mountain, cannot recommend enough. Not to mention the fact that Claire is just an absolutely lovely person. Like, I had the pleasure of talking to her now on Instagram, and I remember when I first started talking to her thinking, oh my God, I'm actually talking to Sister Mountain. I don't think she understands just how much of an influence she's had on my design career. So please go and check her out. She does incredible work and deserves so much for what she does. So there are resources like that out there on the internet, and I think while we're in this zone, I just wanted to touch on size inclusive grading as well, because I think it's quite a hot topic in the industry, and I think we hear a lot of designers saying they can't do it and they can't grade their patterns for larger sizes because it doesn't work, it's not possible, and it's a load of rubbish really, because the very first garment that I did was size inclusive. And I get maybe because I'd never known anything else, I've only ever known grading for larger sizes, it's all I know, but it's, if you're gonna design, it's something that you should be considering from the very beginning, and it's not even hard. The things, it's not that grading for a larger size is harder, it's just different. And a lot of the time I hear a lot of people saying, well, how can I design for a size that I don't have myself? Well, easily, you just talk to people who have that size body and you listen to them and you take them seriously. So something I've really noticed is that as you go into the larger sizes, the correlation between bust circumference and bicep circumference just goes completely out the window. I mean, even for me, someone in a straight size body, my bicep does not fit in with the sizing standards that are on average for my chest circumference. And again, that's something you learn as a knitter, but as a designer, you really have to be paying attention to these details. The fact that just because a size is getting, a chest circumference is getting bigger, does not mean that everything else is getting longer. So you need to be able to consider how to give the information in your designs on how to alter if you can. Now, obviously, as the knitter, it is your responsibility also, I believe, to learn about your body and how to modify and change things for your body type. And again, there are so many free resources out there to do that. but there's also so much you can do as a designer to make those patterns more accessible for more sizes. And we're not just talking about the higher ranges, we're talking about the lower ranges as well. Just because things are getting smaller doesn't mean things like yoke depth are getting smaller. Really, really important. The number of times yoke depths can make or break a pattern because they've not considered proportion. I feel like I've just said a lot of words in one go, but basically don't let things like size inclusivity stop you from giving it a go. Don't let it freak you out, because it's not any harder, it's just different. You just have to apply slightly different rules. Just like I have to apply rules for my size, you have to apply rules for the other sizes, and it's not difficult to learn those things. So basically there are a lot of ways to learn how to grade, but I think honestly, you just got to give it a go. You just got to try, be scared to fail, be scared to get it wrong, and therefore be scared to learn. And you are not going to get it right the first time. That's okay. That doesn't mean you failed. You've just got to prepare for that in advance. And this is where testing windows come in as well. Having really long, realistic testing windows means you have got time within that test knit to make those changes. Yeah, you don't quite have the grading right on a yoke, we can change it, and we're not going to put pressure on our test knitters to rip everything back and speed knit it again. Just giving yourself that flexibility, that grace, that I'm not going to get it right first time is going to get you there. So practice, research, courses, videos, and tech editors as well. My tech editor has been such a teacher to me. Yes, she checks the maths and everything, but through the editing process, so I just had to change my battery. It's gonna be a long video. So yes, as I was saying, my tech editor taught me so much. Not like she sat down and had a lesson, but through the process of editing, I learned so much about grading. So that brings us on nicely to tech editing. Another question I got a lot is, how do you find a tech editor? Should I get a tech editor? What's the point of a tech editor? So much. So I found my tech editor through a recommendation from a friend. I will link my tech editor below. My goodness, I want to gatekeep this so hard because she's so precious to me, but I won't. I will link my tech editor below. I use a wonderful Frauke from Urban Yarning. She is incredible. The way she communicates with me and talks with me works for me so well. But I also believe that tech editors are like therapists. You've got to find the right one that speaks to you in your language. It's okay to find a tech editor, work with them, not enjoy the experience, and try somebody else. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that tech editor. People communicate differently, people work differently, so finding the right tech editor can be a process. I was just really lucky that the first one I found was just perfect for me. So if you want to learn to grade well, not just how to do it, but well, you have to have a tech editor. Now, my very first pattern, I didn't use a tech editor, it was a sock pattern, and I basically substituted my tech editor for my sister because she's a graphic designer, and at the time she helped me with my branding. Now, you don't have to have this all done by a professional graphic designer. It can be done with AI, it can be done in Canva. If you want to have a full brand identity like me, then yeah, we can go on Fiverr and employ someone to do it for you, and it not cost too much money. If you just want a quick logo, then yeah, Canva, AI, that kind of thing is great, but full branding is something that's really going to elevate you as a knitwear designer. So during that process, she helped me format and design my very first physical pattern. And through that process, she obviously checked all the spelling, she checked all the language. I had checked the maths a million times. I then had a test knit in which the maths was checked. And obviously because it was a sock, it was very minimal grading. And I think I just about managed to get away with it. And I know a lot of people start with socks, they start with accessories that have only a few sizes, minimal grading, and that's a great place to start because a lot of those issues can be found out in the test knit. And then my first tech editing experience was actually when I did the school run set. I found I had a different tech editor that I started with, but she stopped tech editing and she specialised in more like accessories and stuff, and she charged by the hour, and she just did the final format check. I'd done the grading, I'd done the writing, I'd done the test, and I had the final format, and I just wanted to make sure that everything was perfect. So I asked her to look over it, just each thing once, literally one edit. It was very, very inexpensive, and I was confident that I could release those patterns knowing that they were perfect, because I always felt quite a lot of anxiety with the early patterns that they weren't good enough because I hadn't gone through that process. So if it's garment design that you really want to do, you have to have a tech editor. There is no way around it. You cannot edit your own work. You cannot see your own mistakes. This is why people who write anything ever have editors, because you just have to do it. And it's a cost. It is definitely a cost now. Different editors will charge different rates. My editor charges a different rate for different things. Some editors charge per hour, some charge per item like mine. I roughly pay approximately £100 for a garment tech edit, unless I go overboard. So for me, that will include all the edits is in that one flat rate. Now, sometimes there'll only be 2 edits, sometimes there'll be 20 edits, and you know, that kind of feels a bit weird, but when I look at the amount of knowledge that I've learned from my tech editor over time, it's well worth the money. With this one, when I had like 1 million edits, I did actually go over the threshold and was then put on an hourly rate. But again, it was fine because it needed it. I knew this one was so difficult to do. But if you want to confidently release that pattern knowing it's the best it can be, you have to go through that process, and it is highly likely that your first release will not make it money back. It's highly likely that most of your patterns will not make the money back. We're going to go into that later on. She said it again. But if you want to be serious, if this is something you want to do as an income stream, even if you want to do it for fun, I still say get a tech editor, because it makes the experience and the process so much easier and so much less stressful. It's like you pay £100 on yarn, you pay £100 on whatever it is your hobby is. It's just as much an investment in your hobby as buying the yarn is. So I think it's a good way to look at it like that. So get yourself a tech editor. There are websites that have lists. I found one doing the research for this video, which I will link below, and it was great because you could like filter it by where you live, the type of craft that you do, the type of design you want editing, if you want help in specific areas, whether that's size inclusivity or chart writing or grading or anything like that. You can filter it, and then you have testimonials, and you can, most good tech editors will share the edit patterns that they've edited, and you can look to the designers, maybe send them a message, say, would you rate this tech editor? Did you have a good experience? That kind of thing. It's really easy to find a tech editor, and quite often the reason we're not looking for the tech editor is because we are a bit scared of actually doing the thing. But get yourself a tech editor. It's the best decision you will ever make for your knitwear design career. Right, so whilst we're still in the grading, there are a few specific questions here that I wanted to answer. Have you always had a knack for maths, or did it develop once you could use it for something worthwhile and not just some fictional problem in school? And this question hit me so hard in the feels because I had always told myself that I was bad at maths because I couldn't do maths in school. Now, I could always do maths in school. I was just in the wrong environment because I had undiagnosed ADHD. But I don't think you have to have undiagnosed ADHD to feel unconfident in something like maths, because learning maths in school, oh my goodness, it's not the same for everybody. Some people absolutely love maths, they thrive in maths and they're really good at it and it's fabulous. But that's not most people's experience. And for a long time, I told myself I was bad at maths. And it's not true. Maths can be difficult, and I do still struggle with it sometimes, but when you practice, when you do something enough times, when you slowly learn to understand it, when you learn how to use Excel, it becomes so much easier and, if anything, quite satisfying. So if the fear of the maths is something that's holding you back, Don't let it be the thing. Start simple. Start with a sock, start with a scarf, start with a hat where you have to do some maths. At the very least, you have to look at your gauge, figure out how many stitches per inch, and then multiply that to find out how many stitches you need to get a certain width. It's really simple. And once you get your head around that, the next thing becomes a little bit more possible. Working out, converting centimetres to inches, working out different ratios. You just baby steps, but I promise you, you can do it. Don't let past experiences with maths stop you. And whilst we're there, the other question was learning to grade easier or harder with a neurospicy brain? How did you learn everything so fast? Did you already have a background in design? I think there's a few questions in there. I think my neurospicy brain made it easier for me to learn grading, if I'm honest, because I can absorb knowledge so quickly, and only if I'm interested in it, to be fair. But yeah, I think it helped. But then at the same time, my neurospicy brain, you know, likes to tell me that I can't do things. So in a way, it also kind of held me back. And then background, did I have a background in design? No, I wouldn't say I've ever designed anything before this. However, I've always understood design quite well, and again, I put that down to my neurospicy brain, and I think I could have been a very good engineer. I have this thing that happens naturally without me trying, and I remember it so clearly with the Midland cardigan in particular. It's like in my brain, I see the garment and then it extrapolates, and I see each different section and I work through it in my brain. It's almost like I knit it in my brain and I construct it in my brain. And I'm like, well, if I did this, then that would happen. So we need, and honestly, it's like numbers, letters, like symbols, and it happens all in there. Now, I don't know if that is a neurodivergent thing. I don't know if that happens to neurotypical people as well, but it is definitely something that is inherent in me. I definitely have a natural ability with design, I think. And anything creative, I've always been creative, but that doesn't, if you don't have that, it doesn't mean you can't learn it. Because I feel we can learn, as human beings, we can learn anything. And the amount of times we hold ourselves back because we're scared of learning or we don't think we can learn, we need to break free from that. So, but if you think your brain does that too, then that's a great sign that, you know, you really, really should give design a go if your brain already does that like mine. Right, so now we're going to move into a new subject. We're going to move into technical. And these are some specific, why is it so dark? We're going to lean into some more specific questions that I had about the technical side, the design process, all that kind of thing, my experiences. So first one is, how do you find inspiration to come up with such clever ideas? Thank you. My ideas are quite clever, aren't they? Now, inspiration can come from anywhere and everywhere, but I believe it is a mindset you have to be in to let the inspiration come. Now, I could be inspired by the yarn, I could be inspired by a stitch, I could be inspired by something I see on the high street and think, that's cool, I could knit that, but maybe I'd do it differently. Or could I knit that? Let's give it a try. Like, being inspired by existing garments is fine. It might be that I see a trend that's happening. You obviously don't want to be copying specific designs, but we are all inspired by each other, and that's okay. Nobody owns anything when it comes to knitting. Nobody owns a construction style. Nobody owns a stitch. Nobody owns a motif. Obviously, you need to be respectful of fellow designers, and we're going to get into that further on, but you can be inspired by anything and everything. I'm very much often inspired by need, like the Russell scarf. It was really, really cold and I needed a scarf, so I made a scarf. Things like that. Honestly, inspiration can come from anywhere, but letting that inspiration come to you, you have to be in the correct mindset for that to happen. Bear with. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I made in the early years of my knitwear design career was trying to be something that I wasn't, was trying to achieve an aesthetic that I thought was what people wanted, was what I thought would be trendy and cool, and just trying to be trying to design this thing that I thought I should be. And that does not, one, that's not fun, and two, doesn't normally create a successful design, in my opinion. And that for me has been proven in the sweet shop. I had no real goal with that. I was just doing what I loved. That was exactly the same with the Maxines. It's just what I enjoyed doing, what I felt like doing. It was the same with the Stella designs. The key is that when the inspiration comes, I don't let other people interfere with it, if that makes sense. I don't let what other people might think of it. I don't let what other people are doing interfere with it. I just go with what I enjoy and what I like. And with that, you come to become more comfortable as well with the fact that not everyone is going to like what you're doing. Learning that not everyone is going to like what you do is a hard lesson to learn in life, not just in knitwear design, but by letting yourself go with what fuels you, by following the dopamine, by making what you love, you're going to have a much happier experience. And then even if the sales don't necessarily come, you're going to be much more likely to give it another go because the process was enjoyable. Trying to be something you're not is just the killer of inspiration. So whatever it is, however it comes to you, just run with it if it makes you feel good. Also be prepared to feel so passionate about an idea or a design, get halfway through and then it just goes. It's just gone. I don't like this anymore. I've changed my mind. I don't want to do it. And that happens all the time. And I used to feel a lot of pressure to do every single idea. If I share it on the internet and someone says, oh, I really like that, can't wait for the pattern, I used to feel immense pressure to get that pattern done, even when I'd lost the love for it. That's okay. They will get over it. There are a million knitwear patterns to choose from in the world, and if they really want this specific look that they saw that the designer isn't going to do, maybe they could give it a go themselves, do their version of it. Why not? So that's what I've got to say about inspiration. How many months do your designs usually take until launch? Completely depends on the design. The Jacques scarf, for example, I cast it on at the end of February and it'll be launched in April because it's tiny. However, a garment, and the test knit for that is only 4 weeks, a garment should be minimum 8 weeks, if not more, not only for your testers' experience and their enjoyment of the test knit, but you need to allow time for change and for starting from scratch if you have to. So that, and that is months. You're talking like 8 to 14 weeks for a decent garment test knit. That's 3 months. And then not to mention the knitting, the designing, the editing, the writing, that can take anywhere from a week to a month. That took 2 years for the Midland cardigan. But for my current garment design that I've got on the go, I'm taking it very slow, I'm taking it very easy, as and when I feel like it, and I'm really enjoying it. Sometimes I'll get sucked right in and I will knit and write the garment in a week. It all depends, but the point is you need to be prepared for it to take a long time, and I can absolutely tell you that rushing it does not make it quicker. It usually makes it take longer. Right, do you research your design idea to see if it already exists somewhere or just go for it? Now, I think this is sorry, I keep kicking you. I think this is a really interesting question and something that I think could, be somewhat divisive. So when I first started designing, I lived in fear of being accused of copying. And that's something that everybody has to face, because people are always going to make comparisons and are always going to make judgments, and you can't stop that. You cannot control that. And you have to take it upon yourself to not let that affect you. And the best way to do that is to not copy someone. Firstly, most of all, if you know deep down inside that your work is original to you, then you got to let the others think what they think. Now, it does happen that sometimes you will come up with a design and it will be very, very similar to somebody else's work. Now, you could spend hours trawling the internet, trawling Instagram, trawling Ravelry, and you still won't see every single design out there. So chances are there will be a similar design out there somewhere, but that is not something that should stop you from creating a design. Now, I was really, really lucky to have a really positive experience with this early on in my career. When I designed the school run hat, which was my accessory collection, I did mittens, I did a hat, I did a headband. I had been playing about with picot edging and everything like that, and my original mitten pattern evolved to be a hat with a folded up brim with a picot edge. And it, at exactly the same time, a different designer came up with the exact same idea, and I can't remember the name the name of the designer at the time, but honestly it was identical, it was exactly the same, and people made me aware of this and I was distraught. I cried, I sobbed, I felt like I was an original, I was terrified of being accused of copying, I felt like I had failed. And then this designer, who was way more accomplished than me, reached out to me and said, hey, it's been brought to my attention that we seem to have come up with a very, very similar design. I just wanted you to know that it's obvious to me that you haven't copied me, I've not copied you. I can see from our work that we've just come to the same design conclusion, and I just wanted you to know that I'm aware of this and I'm okay with this, and I'm ready to take a united front with you. We have different audiences, we write in different languages, and honestly, it gives me chills to think about it to this day, because that could have gone completely differently. And I see on the internet all the time people accusing other designers of copying their work. And it's like, guys, we don't need to be doing this. And the thing that this designer said to me that has stuck with me forever is, there is room for everyone. You can't guarantee that someone else hasn't made a similar design to you, but that doesn't mean you can't both exist in the knitwear design world. That's why there are a million raglan sweaters out there. There are a million vanilla socks. And it doesn't mean that people are copying each other. It doesn't mean people aren't an original. Because a knitting pattern is so much more than its final aesthetic. And this is something that I think a lot of people need to learn out there on the internet. Just because a finished garment looks similar does not mean that the patterns are the same. It does not mean that someone has copied somebody else. What makes my patterns unique is the way that I write. It's the research that I do. It's the effort that I put in. It's the way that I format. It's all that kind of stuff. And not everybody likes the way that everybody else writes. I absolutely cannot stand a pattern that is full of information, and that is no shade to designers that pack their patterns with information, because there are so many people out there that love that and really appreciate that in the pattern. I can't do that because it triggers me. But with my designs, I try to find the balance between giving all the information you need and it not being overwhelmingly full of information. I will always say that my patterns are intermediate pretty much, because I don't write for beginner friendly, because I find you need a lot of information. That's not the way I like. So it might be that you find two patterns that look very, very similar, but you prefer the way that designer writes. So yeah, you need to be aware of those people's designs out there, but I don't think it's necessary to spend hours and hours trawling in the internet to find out if it's already been done, because probably it has. You do get the outliers, like even the souffle at the time, there was nothing like that on the market, but lo and behold, around the same time I released the souffle, there was a similar style pattern in I think it was Liner magazine or Pom Pom. It had the mohair ruffle, but it also had lots of lace, and it was very different. And it was like, we had no idea what each other were doing, but we did the same thing at the same time. And that's fine, because there's room for everybody in this industry. I feel quite passionate about this. Now, obviously, plagiarism is a completely different thing, and that is not okay. But there is room for everyone. So moving on from that, how do you manage multiple designs without getting overwhelmed? This is a big one, because The answer is I can't. Or at least I couldn't. I'm going back to that time after the souffle where I was like, right, this pattern, this pattern, this pattern. If I want to be a knitwear designer, I need to be doing a pattern every month. I need to be doing 12 patterns a year minimum. It needs to be one after the other, multiple patterns, go, go, go. No wonder I got overwhelmed. My goodness. If you are starting your knitwear career, one at a time. If you feel like you can handle another one, great, but please do not overdo it. It is only now that I am 4 years into my design journey that I can handle more than one pattern at once. And even then, I still limit it. I like to have one in testing and one in production. And sometimes I'll have 2 in testing and 2 in production, but I will be making sure that those release weeks are separate. And that's just come with practice. That's come from refining my process, from getting better at my process. Some people have the ability and the brain space to do that from the off. You know, I'm not going to lie, some people can just do that instinctively. I can't, so I don't make myself. And it was with time and practice and grace that I got to the point where I could handle multiple patterns at once without being overwhelmed. So just take your time and do one at a time. Oh my goodness. Do you think you have to be a successful content creator to be a successful designer? Now, this is another one of those divisive ones. And it's because I don't believe you should have to be a successful content creator to be a successful knitwear designer, but unfortunately, it's the world we live in. I very much think the reason I was able to make that first big step, the reason my earlier designs were successful or enough for me to want to continue were because of my social media following. Now, at the time, it wasn't massive at all. And like, we're talking like 5,000 people on Instagram, which I know is a lot of people. In the grand scheme of things though, we tend to lose sight of those numbers and think, oh, if we haven't got tens of thousands or 100,000, then we're not a successful content creator. But actually, having a small but loyal following is really, it does help. Definitely helps. If you just write a pattern and you put it on Ravelry, no one's going to see it. And it doesn't matter if you have written the most beautifully written and designed pattern in the world, people probably aren't going to see it. You have to market. You have to market your design. And in this day and age, the best way to market a design is through social media. And that is through having a good Instagram or YouTube or something like that. Now, you don't have to have YouTube and Instagram at all. I really don't think so. It just happened for me that they kind of went alongside each other. I love YouTube. I love talking to a camera. I love talking out loud. I could never do a blog. I could never write. My friend Sophie of the Knit Pearl Girl, she was like blog, writing, Instagram, like posting all the time, all that kind of stuff. She did amazing with that, and that was a big part of her career. And then she released the Aosta and it went like really well, and she had that initial boost from her following, but she didn't do YouTube at all, and she still became a successful knitwear designer. My Instagram is nowhere near the size of hers, but I've got a really solid YouTube following that supports it. So I do think, yeah, having a good social media following is important for having a successful knitwear career. It's annoying because it shouldn't be that way. It should be based on how good a knitting pattern is, but that's just not the way the world works. Now, I don't think you need to be striving for tens of thousands of followers. You don't need to become an algorithm slave at all. If anything, that kills it. It makes it even worse. Trust me, I went through that. But, you know, putting time and effort into your Instagram is a great place to start. Now, it doesn't have to be posting every day, but you can consider things like when you post, the quality of your post. You don't need to have fancy cameras. You need to just have, you know, a pretty decent phone and learn how to take pictures with good lighting, with good positioning, with good framing. There's a reason I'm sitting where I am sitting, and I've chosen the spot that I have chosen because it is clear and it is easy to digest, and I'm in the middle of my frame. I'm not down here. I'm not, I mean, sometimes if I've got a lot of things to input, I will sit to one side or another, but I'm usually around here. I've considered my background. Is it overwhelming? It's things like that that are really easy to do and that will help you grow your social medias. There are also a million videos about it on YouTube. how to grow your Instagram, how to be successful on social media, how to grow your YouTube channel. Just watch them. Just stick them on and watch them whilst you're knitting. There are so many ways you can do it. So yeah, putting time and effort into your social media, I think, is a really good idea, because ultimately you're building your market, your people that will buy your patterns. What I don't think you can do is rely on your social media, because yeah, you've built up the following, you've got a couple of thousand followers, you've got people who are invested in you and want to support your work by buying your pattern. But if that pattern is bad, they will not come back and they will tell people that it's bad. So yeah, social media is important, but doing the work to learn and practice and get good at your skill is just as, if not more important, if you want a long career. If you just want to try this as a little bit of fun, then don't worry so much about your social media. But you also need to not worry too much about sales. If you want it to be career-wise, then the two have to go hand in hand, I think, really, in this day and age. So next up, how much does it cost to produce a pattern versus how much do you make from it? Now again, this is a really open-ended question, because the amount it costs to develop a pattern will depend on a lot of different things. You know, I'm at a point now where I get sent yarn and I seek yarn sponsorships now, because it makes my margins lower. If I can be given the yarn, then it doesn't cost me so much to produce a pattern. You have your editors, which again will vary but is a cost. You have your software that you might use. I use InDesign, which costs me £30 a month. I use Canva, which costs me £15 a month. I use Epidemic Sound for my royalty-free music that costs me £10 a month. And all these things are filtered in. You can go really, really hard, like my accountant likes to do. Like your accountant, that costs. The needles that you buy, the energy that you use to light the room that you're working in, the computer that you've got, like all that kind of stuff, are all costs that are going to be different for each person that need to be considered. But most of all, it's your time is your biggest cost. And this is something I'm really bad at doing, because I haven't actually done it, and I've promised myself that in the new tax year, which is next month, I'm going to track my time so I can actually see how much I actually earn per hour. I'm a little bit scared of this, of finding out this information, because I might realise that I'm actually not on that much of a wage, but I know how much I've earned in a year, and I know that for me and my life is sustainable and a full-time wage. Yay! So like how much you earn, like, so, and this is a difficult side of knitwear design, because quite often the costs will outweigh how much you earn, but it also depends on how you value the costs. Do you mind spending time on it? No, if you're doing it and you enjoy it and it's fun and it's enriching your life, then I probably wouldn't consider that a cost. You don't have to be spending money on all the different programs so that your costs are lower. So when it comes to how much the pattern makes, again, really, really personal, and it's up to you how much of that is affected by the costs that you put in the first place, if that makes sense. Like, you could sell 100 copies and that could be a fail, it could be even, it could be profit, depending on how you view how much you've spent on the pattern. But that's not the kind of thing I think you need to worry about when you're starting off. It's the kind of thing that will keep you scared. It's the kind of thing that will keep you stuck if you're worrying too much about the financials of it. Put it this way, I've been designing for 4 years, and it was 2023 to 2024 tax year that I actually made enough money to pay tax. I broke the threshold. Obviously it's different in every country. For in the UK, you don't have to pay tax up to, I think, 12 grand. You still need to let people know that you're earning money. You need to let the government know that you're earning money, but you're not actually paying any tax above that threshold. So it wasn't until the last year or two that I actually broke that threshold. So you got to be realistic about it, really. Chances are you're not going to make a wage from it for years, quite literally. But that's what a side hustle is. That's why you work your full-time job and you do this on the side, and you lower your expectations and you give yourself grace and you take the time to practice. For those first years of my knitwear design career, I was a stay-at-home mum. I had 2 children who weren't in school yet, and I was basically doing it on the side as a bit of fun because I enjoyed it, and I thought, maybe one day we'll see. And I then had the success of the souffle and then the sweet shop, and then by the time both children were in school, I was like, right, here we go, crunch time. I've got the time to be earning money now, and it's what I want to do. I want to work, I want to have a career. It's important to me, it's important to my family. I'm really going to give this a go now that I've got the time. And that is kind of how I got to be earning enough, because I had enough time to put into it, and I had the luxury of being able to do that. Would you consider publishing a book with your current designs? And there was another question about have I done submission calls, magazines, that kind of thing. Now, I hadn't actually considered doing a book of my current designs, because I'm like, well, why would anyone buy that when they're already available on Ravelry? So I probably wouldn't do that. However, one of my big goals is to write a book. This is to write a book of knitting patterns. I have an idea, I have a concept, I have like my, what's it called, USP, unique selling point. I've got the idea. I just need to find the guts to do it. And that brings me into magazines and submissions. Yes, I have applied for one magazine submission and it got accepted, and that was the John Arbon Annual 5 that's coming out in September this year. And I resisted doing this for a long time because I was scared of rejection, to be honest, but also I really didn't like the idea of working to somebody else's deadline, to somebody else's style sheet, to somebody else's like I just didn't like the idea of that at all. And so the reason I chose John Arbon is because I already had a really lovely working relationship with John Arbon. They've been sponsoring yarn for me for a while. I had met them all in person. I knew who they were. John Arbon is a really special and personal yarn brand to me. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to try this with anyone, it's going to be these people, because I'm not scared and I feel like I could do this. And lo and behold, my design got chosen and the process has been fantastic. It's been hard. I've really had to challenge myself mentally and to stick to the deadlines and to work in a way I don't normally work, but I did it and it felt great. And the reason I decided to give it a go is because I want to practice for my future book. I want to get used to writing to a deadline, writing something that isn't necessarily my own personal aesthetic, or because it's something that I want and need right now. Like honestly, I think if that design that I've done for John Arbon was something I just was doing for myself, I wouldn't have taken it to completion because it was difficult. I came up with some really, really big, like, moments where I didn't think I could get through it. I didn't think I could make the design work. I didn't think I could make the maths work. It was really hard to design, but because I'd promised it, it made me push through those moments, and I think it was really good practice. So yeah, I do want to write a book one day. So if you're a publisher or you know one, hit me up, slide into my DMs. We're going to do it one day. I am going to write a book one day. So that's all the kind of technical questions. This is going to be a very long video. So then the last section, we've got 4 more questions, and this is about mental health, my favourite subject. But I'm going to call it more like mental health and mindset and that kind of thing, because I know that's what a lot of people struggle with. So the first is, how do you find time having small kids and maintaining your work-life balance? Now, I did briefly mention this when the kids were at home. It was a major balancing act. Things took a lot longer, things were a lot harder to do because the kids were there. But I would use, and like the precious time I had when they were in childcare, I didn't feel like I could spend on my knitting time because it didn't feel like work to me. I wasn't in that mindset yet. But basically, once they were both in school and I had 9 till 3, 5 days a week, I was able to kind of fully more commit to it. I learned quickly that you can't grade a pattern whilst you've got a toddler running around. So I would do it at the times where the kids weren't around, or I would do it in the evening, or I would, say to my husband at the weekend, I'd really like to do this piece of work. I'm going to go and sit in that bedroom for an hour. Can you make sure the kids don't disturb me? Things like that. You have to separate that, I think. It's not the case for everyone. Some people can juggle those things really easily, but me, personally, in my brain, I need to be able to focus. So you basically just have to make the time. Fortunately, you can sit and sample knit for hours with a toddler hanging around. You just have to prioritize the time. And I still do that now to this day. I do all my admin, all my focus work, all my difficult work, grading, writing in the morning when they are not here. And then I prioritize sample knitting for the afternoon when they are here, and I can just sit with them with what they're doing. I can sit with my son whilst he's playing Minecraft, or I can, you know, obviously I don't knit and play with my daughter at the same time, but you just have to organise your time, basically. You just have to be a big girl and organise. You have to write down your schedule, you have to prioritise things in the right times and just do it. You have to learn what works for you. This is a very, very steep learning curve for me, I tell you. Do you feel you have no days off because knitting is your hobby and job? How do you manage this? Yeah, I really struggled with this for quite a while. And the way I managed this was through a mixture of mindset, therapy, and practices. So it took me a long time for me to accept what I do as work. I felt very much like an imposter, and we will talk about imposter syndrome, but I wasn't taking myself seriously. I wasn't like seeing my work as work. Like, if people asked me what I would do, I would say, oh, I'm a knitwear designer, but I would feel like an absolute fraud. And that's because I wasn't seeing it as work. I wasn't telling myself it was work. And all I had to do was to tell myself it was work over and over again until it stuck, and now it does. And now I feel a very clear difference between my knitting work and my non-work knitting, if that makes sense. I had to build that self-esteem, that self-confidence that what I do is valid work. It earns money, it pays bills, it saves for my future. It is work. It might not look like traditional work, but it is. This, what I'm doing right now, sitting talking to a camera, this is work. Sitting and editing it, that is work. Knitting a swatch, yeah, I get to watch the telly at the same time, but it is still work. The designs wouldn't happen without that work. And just establishing that mindset is really important. Now, I do also make sure that I have non-knitting, non-work projects. Now, they kind of come and go. I do have a couple of garments from other designers on the needles, but I tend not really that much of a garment knitter, if I'm honest. I think I'm happier in accessories, fabric, that kind of thing. So like blankets, shawls, scarves, accessories, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Not necessarily forever. I go through phases, but for me at the moment, the thing that keeps me sane is sock knitting. And the boundary I have in place is at the weekends, I knit socks. And when I'm like out and about, and sometimes in the evening, like if I've been working all day and I get to the evening, it can be really tempting to be like, okay, I'm just going to pick up the body of that sweater and work on that a bit more. But that's when you blur those lines and it becomes an enjoyable. I'm like, do you know what? I've got an hour to knit this evening. I'm just going to knit on a sock. And that's what I love. That personally for me, I like sock knitting because it's stress-free, it's easy, it's simple. I don't have to use my brain. It's fun. And that just is what works for me, really. I don't want to have to read a pattern. I've been doing that all day. I've been writing it. Like, I want to be out of that headspace. So I think choosing projects that are completely different to what you do for your work knitting is a good way to manage that, I think. Now, there are times where I'm really enjoying a work project and I will work on it in the evenings and at the weekends, but only if I'm enjoying it. Also, setting out specific sample knitting time is really, really useful, and quite often I'll enter a phase where I've basically got a week of sample knitting, where there's very little admin, where there's no editing, where there's all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, right. I remember when I got the yarn for this sample, I basically put aside a week to only work on this. And it was glorious. And it was like, oh, this is wonderful. I'm so lucky that I get to do this. And that felt really great. And I had to let myself feel that. I had to feel like, yeah, this is what you do. This is your work. And isn't this wonderful that you get to sit and do this? It's fantastic. So it's all about mindset and healthy boundaries that work for you, I think. Oh, right. Then we've got, when did you feel like this could be a career for real? When did you feel like you had made it? Now, I remember saying years ago, I will feel like a knitwear designer when I pay my first tax bill. I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of how it worked out. Like before my first official tax bill, I still kind of had that like feeling of, I don't really know, but I was getting there. I was calling myself a knitwear designer. I knew I was putting the hours into it, and it felt uncomfortable, but I just kind of had to tell myself I was doing it, almost like fake it till you make it. Although I wasn't faking it, I was definitely doing it, but just had to keep telling myself. But there have been moments throughout my career when I released the souffle, like the sweet shop, and I'm trying not to put like money and sales into my self-worth when it comes to I'm a knitwear designer, but it is a big part of it. It is, and it's awkward to talk about because we are taught to be modest and not talk about our success and not talk about that kind of thing. But yeah, when I looked at that, when I got that figure back from my accountant that said you've earned this much money this year and you have to pay this much tax, it was like, that's a full-time wage. That is more than I ever earned in a year in my career before. Granted, I was a waitress and a pub manager, so they don't pay very well particularly, but it was like, yeah, do you know what, seeing the financials of it really did help me cement that this is my career. I want to still work on that. I'm still working on finding my worth in what I do, and actually recently I was asked to do a talk at Unravel Festival, and that was a really big experience for me. It was incredibly anxiety inducing. It was really terrifying and really difficult, but when I came out of it, it really made me feel like, it made me really look at myself and think, look, Laura, someone that you don't know, who's never met, has looked at you and your work and what you do and has thought, this person has probably got some pretty good insights into the industry and might have something interesting to say because they are an expert at what they do. Let's get them at our thing. And I really had to force myself to believe that. And it was like, yeah, this is what I do. I am good at this. I have value here. I've got something to give. I am a knitwear designer. This is what I do. So though there have been points in my career where I've felt it specifically, it's something I've really had to just become comfortable with and form in myself to get beyond that kind of self-doubt and that imposter syndrome. You just have to tell yourself to do it. Now, one of the questions, not necessarily questions, but one of the things that I got back most on Instagram was, how do you get past the fear of doing it? I feel like an imposter. I'm scared to do it. I've got an idea, I've got a pattern, but I am scared to release it. Getting past that fear is really hard. It really, really is. And I don't have a magical answer for you, but the only way to do it is to do it and is to face the fear. To not put your worth in the results, but to put your worth into your efforts. You wrote a pattern, you did something hard, you tried, you gave it your best, you did the research, you did the work, you did it. That is your success, not how many people buy the pattern. That is your success, and that's really difficult, and it doesn't come naturally to most of us, and it's really, really hard. And I know I find that's easy for me to say because I've sat here and had 2 years of therapy and working on my self-esteem and my self-worth, but I also went through that process of the fear and the imposter syndrome. And something I've learned about imposter syndrome particularly is that quite often we feel imposter syndrome when there's a part of us that maybe hasn't quite done enough. And that might be hard to hear, and it might be difficult to look at yourself in that way, but I'm thinking about my talk again, and the imposter syndrome was big. It was massive, and I was feeling that imposter syndrome right up until I did my final run through, and I could sit there and I was like, I've done this now. I've done the work. I have worked as hard as I can. I have been the best that I can be. I have not held back. I have not scrimped. I have not cut corners. I've worked really hard at this. And if there are people out there who don't like it, then that is their right. That is fine. That's their opinion. They don't have to like what I do. But I know deep down, I worked as hard as I could, and the imposter syndrome melted away. So I hope that made sense. If you're feeling scared to do it, just do it and let go of perfection. If you go into this thinking, this has to be perfect, this has to be the best thing I've ever done, this has to break boundaries, this has to be the most innovative, well-written thing in the whole entire world, then chances are it's not going to be. And it's not going to be fun, and you're not going to want to do it again. So just go into it with minimal expectations and just do what you love. It might be that that first pattern that you write never sees the light of day. It could be, that was certainly the case for me, it could be that you give it a go and you don't actually enjoy it, you don't actually like it, so you don't, but at least you tried. It could be that you do it and yeah, maybe people don't buy it, but if it came from a place of like you and love and creativity, then you're probably going to do it again and it won't be as scary the next time. Oh man, I'm sorry if this has gotten a bit like self-care, self-love, but it's true. Stop trying to avoid it. You've got to just be kind to yourself and just do it. Do the scary thing. Honestly, the scary things are never as scary in real life as we think that they are in our brains. Okay, so finally, this is a few questions put together. What has been the hardest lesson to learn? What are the challenges and misconceptions of being a knitwear designer? The hardest lesson to learn is not every pattern is going to do well. Really, really hard. Getting out of that mindset of each pattern has to be better than the one before is really, really hard. And so there was a conversation I had with my friend Sophie recently. We were talking about how, you know, the sales of a pattern isn't actually a true reflection of its value. How just because a pattern didn't really hit and didn't really sell as well as before, it doesn't mean you're not bringing new people to your work and they don't then go and buy a different one of your patterns, or they clock onto you and they buy one of your patterns in the future. You can't quantify that, you can't measure that. So letting go of sales equals worth was difficult. And obviously, if you're in the position that I am in now, where this is my career, sales are important, but getting so caught up on the minutiae, one of my favourite words ever, of each individual pattern, you're just going to be causing yourself so much stress. You need to stand back and look at it as a whole. The year the Sweet Shop was released, that Sweet Shop was so huge. It was such a big part of my career and it sold so many copies. And no, none of my other patterns that year did as well. But the success of that pattern gave me the time and space to experiment, to try different things, because I wasn't resting on every single pattern doing well. And I'd learnt that lesson that not every single pattern has to do well. Like the patterns that don't do well are quite often the patterns that I learn the most from. Did I post it? Did I release it at the wrong time? Did I use the wrong kind of yarn? Could I have chosen a better colour? All these kind of different things. Even the ones that don't sell are still valuable. That's the hardest lesson I had to learn. What are I think we've gone through like what are the challenges of being a knitwear designer. Mostly it's our brains holding us back from doing the hard thing. And then I think the biggest misconception about being a knitwear designer is that you spend all your time knitting. Honestly, seriously, it is at least 50% admin, if not more, depending on how you do things and the level at which you do things too. Obviously, the way I do things have high admin because I do YouTube as well. We've already said you don't have to do YouTube as well, but filming, editing, researching, prepping takes up a lot of my time. replying to comments, checking social media, responding to emails, setting up brand deals, organising yarn support. There's a lot of admin and really not a lot of knitting, but when you get your mindset right and you get in a good habit with the admin, then the sample knitting side of things just becomes the most glorious, enjoyable part of it. And next week I've got my voice is going again. I've been talking for nearly 2 hours. Next week I have a pretty much purely sample knitting week and I am so excited. So it does happen, but my goodness, you need to be prepared for the admin. If you want a successful business, you've got to do all the stuff. You've got to keep on top of your ins and outs. You've got to keep on top of your emails. You've got to have good organisation. You need to take care of your workspace. You need to get a lot of sleep. You need to prioritise what makes you feel good. So that means not working sometimes. There's so much to it. There's so much more to it than just sitting and knitting, I promise you. And that's the biggest misconception. So I think that brings us to the end. I really hope you learned something from this video. I feel like it's much longer than I intended it to be and maybe a bit rambly, but I mean, I'm on brand. That's who I am. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you if you made it to the end. I'd really like to know how you felt about this type of video. It's very different to what I normally do. If you enjoyed it, let me know. And if you have any questions, then please pop them in the comments below. And if I feel like there needs to be a part 2, though I doubt it because I feel like this video is 3 hours long, I will try and do that for you. So thank you for being here. Thank you as always for supporting me and my work. I literally couldn't do it without you guys here. It's where it all started and I'm just so grateful for this platform that I have here on YouTube. I hope those of you that have been with me for a long time will have noticed the more recent frequency in posting here on YouTube. It's one of my priorities this year is to really put more time and effort into my YouTube because it just makes me so happy and it's where I began and it's such an important part of my business. So I hope you are seeing and enjoying the benefits of that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me and I will hopefully see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.